This is a prelude to today's episode of Into Your Head Podcast Hello. Today's episode of Into Your Head Podcast Hello. Can you hear the toilet refilling in the background? You probably can't. Well, we'll find out now. We'll find out for once and for all whether you can or not. I'm going to leave this in, and if you can hear the toilet filling in the background, then it means I've heard it too, so you don't have to tell me. I figured it out during the post-production process that the toilet refilling is audible and that I need to hold off for 30 seconds before I start recording these things after a piss break. Or else I suppose I could use the 30-second break to wash my hands, and then by the time I'm finished that, the toilet could be refilled. Or I suppose I could do that. Maybe I'd get less dental infections if I washed my hands every now and again. That's probably what you were thinking, is it? Yeah, probably is. Stop fucking judging me. For one thing, you don't know about the dental infection yet because this is a prelude and that's a later segment in the programme. For another, I've only had one recently and it wasn't caused by not washing my hands. Yeah, I wash my hands. I wash my fucking hands, so I do. But we'll come to that later. Anyway, this is a prelude to today's episode of I said that already. Delete the preceding bit where you probably don't know about it now because I've deleted it. No need to worry about that. Me during the editing process, I was about to say delete the preceding thing that was unnecessary, but you've already deleted it by now if you've heard it, so it's gone now. So you'll probably delete this bit as well where I tell you about it, or leave it in if it's got some entertainment value. Use your judgment, and I'll just get on with this. This is a further prelude to today's episode of Into Your Head Podcast Hello. I just noticed something interesting there. I'd finished making that prelude, and I was saving it. I was writing in a little tag on it. I was labelling it as prelude. And while I was doing that, I happened to notice an extra little gargling sound coming from the toilet. Several minutes now after it supposedly finished refilling, I heard a little gargling sound. It sounded a bit like someone who was swishing their teeth out. Maybe because I have that on my mind. I have teeth on my mind, so that's what comes up. But no, it sounded a bit like someone gargling. There's been a couple of minutes of silence because the toilet had supposedly finished refilling. But then, I'm just sitting here innocently and I hear out of nowhere some gargling, swishing, refilling further sounds, random. And that's normal, by the way. That happens all the time. Well, I say it's normal. There's another toilet in here in a box somewhere that's been sitting here for months waiting to be installed. I have to get someone to do it. So I suppose the other toilet there should be deemed to be not functioning properly. If I've already bought a new one, then why am I judging the noises coming from the old one that I just haven't been bothered to replace yet? I suppose that's a bit ridiculous, especially since the noise would be further unusualised by the fact that I've already thrown away the lid of the cistern from the old toilet. I had a skip here a few weeks ago, and I thought, I can't throw out the toilet yet because I have to get a professional to disconnect it. But I can throw out the removable lid of the cistern. So I threw out the removable lid of the cistern to make use of the skip while I was there. Now, I don't know if you have much experience of disposing of old toilets. I didn't until quite recently. A couple of years ago, I disposed of one where I didn't have a skip. So I got the old toilet and the cistern. It was in two parts. Had been brought out by the plumber out to the back garden, so I put them inside a couple of old duvet covers, and then I tied a knot in the duvet covers and got a hammer and smashed up the whole thing, the whole old ceramic toilet and cistern in two parts inside a bag made from duvet covers. That was very satisfying. I can heartily recommend that to anyone. Just be careful. Don't injure yourself. If you're a child, don't do that at all. And if you're an adult with the intellectual ability of a child, just ask me for help. I have a brother who's an adult with the intellectual ability of a child through no fault of his own. And if he was going to do that, I would hope he'd ask me. As it happens, he wouldn't do that because he leaves that stuff to me. I'm one of the adults around here effectively now because my mother's not here anymore. She was an adult. She was 90. I'm one of the children, but I'm effectively also, by default, I'm the adult now in my immediate family. My wife is also an adult, but she's not. She's married into it, so it's not her responsibility to be the adult in this house. It is my responsibility. Although, is it? I don't know. I didn't make my siblings. Am I responsible for them? Well, I suppose in a way I am. I suppose that's debatable, though. We're not going to debate it on here. For one thing, it's not your place to judge me over things like that, and it's not my place to discuss it with you on a whatever this is. This is supposed to be a further prelude about a toilet cistern thing. I suppose for the first 80% of the prelude, it was that. Just in the last 20% or so, we've wandered off topic. I was just listening to a podcast about podcasting by people who overthink these things. And there was a fella says, no, stick to your plan and have a plan and a topic you talk about because people come in to hear about a particular topic. But if you want to experiment and talk about something else, do that in the last 20% of the show. And then people who don't like it will go and take a running jump at themselves. I suppose I've messed that up by putting it in as a prelude before we've even started. When there's dozens of people on here who have never even heard the program before, they've just subscribed. And what's that? The thing from LinkedIn. Neal, your post got 10 impressions. That's fantastic. I put a LinkedIn thing up the other day. The most natural thing in the world. Why seeing a toilet makes you thirsty. Absolutely fantastic. That's one of my most successful LinkedIn posts ever. So well done. Well done, all involved. Anyway, on with the show. Once upon a time, there was a dog. A dog. A dog. A dog. Basically a dog. Now, a quick note for new listeners. This is something I do just to get going sometimes. It makes a nice change from two cats walk into a bar, or you join me at a tremendously exciting moment, or I know what you're thinking there. Sometimes I go, once upon a time there was a dog. It's actually quite painful sometimes. Painful in a satisfying way, like if you climbed Mount Everest and you came down and you said, I've a fucking pain in my feet now from that fucking mountain. You wouldn't say that. You'd say, this is great. I've climbed Mount Everest and I can feel it in my feet every time I get up off the sofa to go for a piss. I can feel it's very satisfying ache in my feet. And it tells me, look, I've achieved something. I've climbed Mount Everest and I've lost all of my toes because they were amputated. That's not a problem. I don't worry about that. Especially since the last Everest book I read. Turns out I've read numerous books about people climbing Everest and losing their toes and fingers. And I've always wondered why they don't worry too much about it once they get home. They go, how many fingers and toes did you lose in total? And they'll say, I've only about 3 this time. And it was great because I climbed Mount Everest in winter and I get all the accolades. And I did worry. To be fair, I did worry about my fingers and toes while we were up there. Well, once you get the final total at the end in the hospital to tell you how many toes and fingers they're going to chop off because of the frostbite, then that's it. You just go, I've lost 4 fingers and 3 toes. I suppose that's life, I suppose. Like the Frank Sinatra song. That's life. That's what they say. Climbing high in April, reached the summit in May. My point is, though, I learned recently while I was reading these books that frostbite on the tip of your nose is a thing. Now, I find that terrifying. I really don't worry too much about toes and fingers. Not least because I'm not a mountain climber and these are only stories I'm reading in books about people who climbed mountains in the 70s. But no, the idea that the tip of your nose could have to be amputated from frostbite, I find that terrifying. Especially since I sometimes wake up in the middle of the night and feel the tip of my nose and it's cold. You get frostbite from lying in bed and not burying yourself under the duvet now. I was about to say, and the barman says, or is it the cat's turn to speak? But we're not doing a two cats walk into a bar story, are we? No. We're doing it. Once upon a time, there was a dog. A dog. A dog. Basically, a dog. And then we continue on and hope that leads on to something. It's rarely lately turns out to be a story about a dog, and that's intentional, don't worry. It's just a way to get going. It's not a thing. Don't come on here expecting there to be a story about a dog every time. Although, to be fair, there have been plenty of stories about dogs ensuing from this, usually about one dog on his own. Because it starts with once upon a time there was a dog. And if it starts at once upon a time there was a dog. Basically a dog. It's very unlikely that would somehow turn out to be a story about more than one dog. Not that I have anything against that. That's just not where it leads to. Although strangely enough, it leads to things like a thing about my darkest fears about my nose falling off because I'm not under the duvet enough. How the hell did that come out from a thing about a dog? I don't know. But apparently I've decided that it can't possibly lead to a story about more than one dog because it says dog. I don't know how that works, but that's just the way it does work. Although it hasn't been working very well lately. Haven't made a show in almost a month. You've probably been wondering. You're thinking, what in the name of Christ is going on there? Well, first I had a cough. And then I said, no, I'm not going to record myself coughing and puking and vomiting into this thing. So then that was fine. I said, I'll try again in another few days. Then my mouth fell off. Basically. I had a dental infection and my mouth fell off. So much so that for one thing I was afraid to drink caffeine or taurine during the day, which is a pre-necessity of making this podcast. For another, my mouth hurt when I use it. And I use my mouth quite actively here. If you're using stuff like, once upon a time there was a dog. If I tried that 3 days ago, it would have been off at the hospital for me. I wouldn't have spent the next 8 hours going, oh, look, I finally made a podcast after a month. I would not. I'd have been saying, my fucking mouth fell off because I tried to use it. I tried to use it in my one little hobby, my one pastime that I've managed to set myself up in 40-something years of life. I've managed to come up with this pastime, and I can't do it even when I'm recovering from a little infection. I can't do my pastime because it involves using my mouth. God forbid I should want to use my mouth for anything pleasurable. Jesus Christ. I come on here, I go, once upon a time there was a dog. And I'm supposed to be grateful because I'm able to do that now for the first time in several weeks. It hasn't been a month, it's been 20-something days. I think it's been just over 3 weeks. But when you open the podcast app now, it says, well, depending which app you go into, it passive-aggressively says, podcast into your head, doesn't have a schedule, but the next episode we confidently expect any day now. Or sometimes it'll say, next episode Tuesday, which is a lie. Your podcast apps are lying to you if they say anything like that about into your head. There's no schedule here. I try to do several episodes a month, but there isn't a schedule. And if it comes along and says, you episode due Tuesday, and then you come along Tuesday and it says, oh, any day now, it's lying to you. Your app is lying to you. It's trying to impress you by saying, oh, we figured out the schedule that this fella has. I don't have a schedule. If I had, the only way you display it on an app is by doing something like, oh, he wakes up about 5:30 in the morning. Then he scratches himself, goes for a piss, gets back into bed, turns on his podcast player, which he's been using as a torch to find the toilet, usually. But lately the mornings have been quite bright, so he's been able to go to the bathroom without switching on the torch on his phone. So he gets back from the bathroom and plays some audio book lately about people climbing mountains and their, falling off, the tips of their noses. He listens to that. and thinks, oh, Christ the nose thing. And then he buries his, I don't know why I'm talking about myself in the third party, but he buries his nose in the duvet. And then he gets roasting. He thinks the rest of me now is burning because I'm worried about the tip of my nose falling off from frostbite. I've overheated myself now. That's probably a thing now. Going to start reading about people who do other hobbies that don't involve it being cold, that involve it being hot. Maybe they go for walks in the desert and their whole body is going to fall off except for their nose. I'm going to be torn between the two of them. That's what's going to happen. I'm back talking about myself in the present party now. That's fine. Either way, that's fine. I'm just delighted. I'm nearly up to 10 minutes here now. I'm actually getting going. Do you know what? I'm going to tell you my darkest fears here now. I was terrified I wasn't going to be able to get going with this again, ever. Came up to an hour ago, I thought, I'll do a 2 cats walk into a bar story. That's what I'll do. Turned out to be a load of bollocks. Now, if you hear a 2 cats walk into a bar story later in this show, that's not the one I'm referring to, because there's a good chance I'll make one later. The one I tried to make earlier, though, didn't work out. It was quite disheartening. It shouldn't be disheartening. I know damn well that I'll get going eventually. Although I thought I knew that, but I haven't got going for weeks now. It's been fucking ridiculous. And I've had an in something of new subscribers. There have been dozens of new subscribers lately here showing up. And there's nothing to give them. I've got nothing to give them except the previous episode, which is being at the top of the thing for weeks. They turn up and they say, oh, this fella, he has this new episode from several weeks ago. It looks great. It looks like, actually, it doesn't look great because it's actually one of the less good ones. That's been annoying me too. The last episode of this podcast was not one of the better ones, but it's been there at the top of the feed now for weeks. And you've been listening to it and probably judging me over it. Have you ever been judging it? You've been saying, oh, look, you get out your phone. I'll do now in sympathy with you. I'll get out my phone and I'll open my podcast app and see what's in this feed. Let's see. An itch no McBreakfast can scratch. Now that's clearly bollocks. And that's being at the top of the podcast feed for this show for several weeks now, to my embarrassment. I mean, it's not terrible. It's just the previous 1 or 2 were better. And I'd prefer, if it's going to stay at the top of the feed for several weeks, I'd prefer it to be one of the better ones and not one of the less better ones. Call me old-fashioned. I don't know. You probably think of yourself as not old-fashioned, do you? You probably do. Well, you're listening to a podcast here. That's about as old-fashioned as you can get. The young people don't listen to podcasts. They have YouTube and TikTok and what's that other thing with the words? They have that other thing with the words, and they have the thing with the pictures. They have the television. Well, they don't really have the television, but they have the streaming television, and it tells them, here's a new thing about crime. It's usually some crime thing. I think it's called a crimomentary now, they call it. A crime documentary. It's a crimomentary. They come up on Netflix, they have a whole crimomentary section. It says, oh, look, some poor bastard got murdered by his wife. We're going to have a big long thing about it. We're going to make 10 episodes. Going to say, here's this poor bastard. He got murdered by his wife just after he rose to success in Saturday Night Live. And not WKRP in Cincinnati. The other one, News Radio. He was in News Radio. Their man who was murdered by his wife. Now, I don't think there's been a crimomentary about him on Netflix, but there probably will be one day. Someone will think, we'll make a crimomentary about him, your man. What's his name? The comedian fella. He was murder-suicided by his wife in the 1990s or the 1980s or the 2000s, whenever it happened. And then that was the end of that. He was dead and she was dead. And loads of people came on and said it's terrible, which indeed it was terrible. Don't go around killing your husband, whether he's successful on Saturday Night Live or not. Even if he's a shit comedian who's never been on television in his life, he's comparable to the character portrayed in the latest Joker movie, who's clearly I was been watching documentaries about that, incidentally. I've been watching documentaries or YouTube commentaries about the latest Joker movie, starring your man out of Gladiator. And from what I see, I haven't seen the movie, but it seems to be a complete remake of that thing with Robert De Niro where he plays a comedian who kidnaps late-night talk show presenter. But it's also based on Michael Douglas's Falling Down, except without there's no fast food restaurant scene, which is really disappointing. The Joker would have done great in a fast food restaurant scene, but no, instead they just show him having a mental breakdown and going mad, and then having loads of scenes which apparently you have to spend the rest of your life trying to figure out which bits are real and which bits are fantasy and who he killed and who he didn't kill and what really happened. Did he go on TV or not? The one with Robert De Niro is a lot easier to understand, as is the one with Michael Douglas in Falling Down. But no, the Joker now, they have to make it all complicated. You have this fella, they don't even, half the time they don't even show him in the makeup and wig thing, like the clown makeup. You just have to go, wait, is this fella we're looking at here, is this the Joker fella who the movie is about? You spend the first hour thinking, wait, are we in the right cinema? Is this the Joker fella? He doesn't seem to be telling any jokes at the moment. He's just going around murdering people. Seems to be. Although, look, there's a thing where he's comedian-y stuff. I don't remember him being a comedian in the cartoons. I remember in the cartoons he was just this fella with a broad smile that looked like it was painted on, because it was painted on. For one thing, it was a cartoon. Cartoons in those days were painted. Some fella would get out a bit of glass and he'd say, we have to show the Joker smiling now. So we just get a normal template of the Joker with no smile, just a neutral expression. And we put that behind the pane of glass and then we paint the smile over that. And then we wipe that clean with an eraser and then we paint another smile, slightly broader, because it's animation. That's how you do animation. You draw the same picture over and over and over again with slightly different, but you take shortcuts. You do things like, you get a pane of glass and you put the scene behind it, like the Simpsons house and the road they live on. And then you draw the Joker smile over that, but you show it getting bigger and bigger each time. And you keep cleaning off the glass. Which I suppose is one way to do it. There's probably other ways to do it as well. I've never been involved in animation. I have to be perfectly honest. I'm tempted at the moment because I'm making digestible, brief segments of this show as a TikTok and YouTube thing for the young people. I'm putting snackable, shareable segments of this show on TikTok and YouTube. See intoyourhead.com/clips. If you're interested, I think I'm going to start animating them. We're not in some young people animate-y thing where you go into an app and say, here's a clip from my podcast, put a character in it and make it move its lips automatically. No. I'm going to get some plasticine, like Morph on the children's television program in the 1980s. There's a fella called Morph who was made out of plasticine. It was a segment on an art program. An art and crafts program. So they had this fella, Morph, who was made from plasticine, and they show him assembling and disassembling himself using stop motion photos. I think I'm going to do that with this podcast. Now, it sounds like a lot of work, so I might just maybe I'll get a cat or something, or I'll figure something out. There must be some way of doing it that's original. It's not just some thing, because I don't want some fucking thing. Maybe I'll film myself moving my mouth, moving my lips to this content. Now, it'll be fake, of course. I don't film the audio production. I'll film myself talking and make the mouth move somehow so it syncs up and make it look like I'm saying stuff, which indeed I am. But the whole thing about television and the internet and everything now is you have to make it look real. The fact that it was real in the first place just isn't good enough. If I put this on now, they'd say, that's not realistic. It's not believable that this fella would sit in his late mother's bedroom talking into this thing, saying stuff about dogs and his nose falling off and not film it. So to make it look realistic, we have to create the fiction that he did film it, which I didn't. But the way we do that is by filming him moving his lips later, and then we'll put that over the audio content and make it look real. I suppose I could film myself from behind and then people won't notice that I'm not speaking. Or I could film myself from behind while I am speaking. Turn this into a fucking TikTok. That's what I call it. No offense if you've come here from TikTok. I'm doing quite well on there. So if you come here from TikTok, no offense. Not about you, it's just the people on it who watch my thing. And they say, oh, that doesn't look very realistic. Or else they say, oh, look, that's an AI thing. It drives them nuts now. I put a thing on it. Because it was free, it had the name of an AI company on it. And it's a thing that shows a picture of me from the album art with an audio segment over it that's being assembled by AI. And people say, stop using AI, you fucking cunt. And I say, okay, no need to swear at me. For Christ's sake, stop fucking swearing at me. I'm allowed to swear because I'm playing a character here. You're not allowed to swear. You are allowed to swear, but you shouldn't. You're the audience. I shouldn't even be able to hear you. It's ridiculous. I shouldn't be able to hear you. In fact, most of the time I can't because only 1 in 10,000 people ever comment. But that's fine. Oh, that reminds me. Some listener correspondence to deal with. I'm not in the mood for that at the moment. We'll do that another time. I'm sure there's listener correspondence there, though. And if you want there to be more listener correspondence, that's fine too. But I have to be in the mood for it. Now, on with the show.
Into your head.
Now, I know what you're thinking there. You're thinking, oh, I wonder what he's going to say next. Well, I'm not. I've just come back on. For once in my life, I know exactly what I'm going to say now. Well, I don't know the exact words I'm going to use. But I know what I'm going to talk about at this exact moment. Oh Christ, I've forgotten now. I was going to say, was it about the LinkedIn thing? No. But I was definitely about to say something interesting. Oh yes, that's what it is. I started this show after the preludes and all that. I started the thing where I said, once upon a time there was a dog. I did my usual thing. I just happened to listen back to the beginning of that now. And while I did do my usual, once upon a time there was a dog, I just noticed on the audio, it sounds a bit uncomfortable to listen to, more so than usual. So apologies if it does. I think there is something, maybe it's the way I have this thing pointing. Well, I tried pointing it differently. Once upon a time there was a dog. Note to self, have a listen to that later and see. I'm getting back into this now. We don't have to be all, Rome wasn't built in a day. It was not. Well, for one thing, Rome was formed naturally by the movement of the Earth's crust. And then there was dinosaurs and birds and things, and then there was grass and stuff. And then there was the sea, and then there was the movement of the continents. And then eventually at some point there was an area where people started building Rome. They didn't start saying, oh, we're going to build Rome now. They definitely didn't say we're going to build it in a day. But they didn't say we're not going to build it in a day either. Because why would you? Why would you say that? It's stating the obvious. No one sits down and says, we're going to build a city here. How long do you think it'll take? And someone goes, oh, I'd say allow at least more than a day for it. Allow at least more than a day. I don't want to just be a giver-upper, but let's not bite off more than we can chew. Because if we go around saying it's going to be done in a day, then people are going to spend the rest of history attacking us over it. They'll say, oh, that scheme was running late. Running late? You said you're going to build that in a day. Just so I'm clear here, I'm not saying we're not going to build it in a day. All I'm saying is we won't promote it as planning to be built in a day. So if it turns out that we do build it in a day, we can say, oh, there was underruns and we made some savings. It'll be a bit like when you're getting on a plane from America to Ireland, an overnight flight from the likes of Boston to the likes of Shannon or Dublin. The first thing they say when you get up in the air is they'll say, oh, look, turns out it's a bit windy. We have a wind behind us. There's a very good chance that we're going to be on the ground 10 or 15 minutes earlier than scheduled. They say that every time. And they say, oh, look at us. We're great. We made up some time. Now, what they don't point out is that that's time that you have to spend on the ground. Any time that you don't spend in the air because you got there early, it took longer than expected, that's time you have to spend on the ground. And that's all very well if you're one of these business people And they just say, oh, you've some extra time. You can spend that doing work, sitting in the, I don't know, sitting the office section of the airport or something in your business lounge and do stuff there. Someone will serve you champagne or whatever. But if you're an ordinary, normal holiday maker or a student travelling abroad for a couple of months abroad, travelling round on trains, and suddenly you've an extra 15 minutes on the ground, so you're supposed to plan for that and pay for that and have something to do during it. What in the name of Christ? No, I suppose you could have an extra long shit during it. Be careful now, because no, there's nothing to be careful about. There's nothing particularly dangerous about having an extra long shit. In fact, I would argue that it's safer. The longer you allocate to yourself for a shit, the safer it is, because you're giving yourself extra time. Should there be any unexpected slow movements or blockages, you're allowing yourself extra time to let that out, so you're not going to injure yourself forcing it out. Although now that you mention it, if you're more successful than you were expecting, then you might decide 5 minutes into it, oh, maybe we'll push out a bit more and make a bit of extra effort here. And then you start on a new thing that you weren't expecting to emerge, but it starts emerging. But because it wasn't quite ready then, it takes ages. You end up having an overrun. I suppose that's exactly the sort of thing why it would be useful to have an extra 15 minutes on the ground. You can say the same about an extra 15 minutes in the air. If the wind was in front of you and slowed you down and the plane was going slower, you could spend that time in the toilet on the airplane. Although they probably tell you, we're landing soon, sit down. And I don't mean on the toilet, sit down in your seat. You can't be going queuing for the bathroom during the last few minutes of the flight. And of course you'll say quite rightly, but it's not the last few minutes of the flight. You're having an overrun, we're running late. And they'll say, that's irrelevant, we still have to be ready. Everything you do on the plane, you're required to be OCD about it. Cool, you said you're running behind schedule because you're going against the wind, so surely that gives me an extra 10 or 15 minutes before you have to go and sit down. And they'll say, no, we have to get ready now, whether it's going to take longer or enough. Get ready now. We've already done the little instructional thing where we wave our hands around and tell you what to do if an air thing pops out of the air. By air thing popping out of the air and them telling you what to do if that happens, I'm referring to those little oxygen masks. Should one of them suddenly appear in front of your face, they tell you what to do in the event of that. During the pre-landing talk, at least I think they do. They definitely do one before takeoff. I presume they do one before landing as well. And you'll say, oh, but you've already done all that. And they'll say, yes, exactly, we've already done all that. So you can't be standing up and going to the toilet again, because then we have to start all over again from scratch. Because we did the little talk, and that was to get you seated down and all. You start all over again. So then we have to do that all over again. And you will say, no, you don't have to do that all over again. I have a memory. I can remember things. I watched the little instructional thing. I remember the air thing pops out of the ceiling. It means I'm going to die if I don't cram it into my face immediately, like some sort of artificial snout. I like if a dog's snout fell off in the street, I would know exactly what to do on impulse. It would say, oh, look, that thing's falling off my face. I better bury my face into it and hope it sticks back onto my face. At least I presume that's what happens. I've never been a dog or studied dogs in any great detail. It wasn't really something I majored in college or anything. I don't think. Can you minor in what happens to a dog? You probably can't. Now that you think about it, it's a legitimate study. Whereas people doing studies, presumably, about the face and how the human psyche deals with having a physical body and how its faces work and how you react to faces and how it feels if you think your face is falling off. So it'd be quite a legitimate thing to study that. What happens to a dog who thinks its snout is falling off suddenly in the street? Does it try to pick her up by sticking its face into the ground to pick up whatever is falling? Maybe that would explain why dogs sometimes eat their own shit. They're not doing it just to be gross. They're doing it in case their face is falling off and they're dipping their face into whatever's on the ground. Unfortunately, that includes shit. But they're just trying to collect their face. It's not unreasonable. They're as grossed out about it as you are. They're just trying to save themselves. Not a big thing. If your intestines fell out in the street, you wouldn't say, oh, that's disgusting. I'm not touching those. I'm going to just leave them. You would not. You'd pick them up, or you'd ask someone to help you, or you'd call an ambulance and wait until they arrive with a bucket to pick up your intestines. You wouldn't just go, oh, those are gross. I'm not touching my intestines that are falling out. Once they fall out, fuck off. They can just go and, no to intestinal retrieval, you're thinking. No. Well, there might be all sorts of medical reasons why you shouldn't retrieve them, why you can't retrieve them. But you wouldn't rule that out yourself. You'd wait until some paramedic turns up either by telephone or in writing or in person and tells you, oh, I'm afraid, unfortunately, those can't be put back in. But you wouldn't go, oh, I'm not going to put those back in because they're disgusting. No, you'd wait and find out. Same way if you accidentally sawed your hand off, you wouldn't say, oh no, well, I'll just assume that's not retrievable. I'll assume they can't stitch that back on, even though I've no reason to either think they can or can't. You would not. He'd say, will someone please run to the freezer and get a bag of peas? Don't open it. You put the sawn off hand on top of the bag of peas to keep it cool. It's not supposed to come in contact with the frozen stuff directly, because then you get freezer burn or something. And then call the ambulance, and then we'll see what they say about it. You won't just go, oh, I'll decide now whether or not my hand can be put back on. No, you're not a surgeon. And even if you are a surgeon, you'd still want to get an alternative opinion. If you were performing brain surgery on yourself, you wouldn't perform brain surgery on yourself. You get someone else to do it, because you know full well, not that you're not a good brain surgeon. You're probably a great brain surgeon. It's just that because you're a great brain surgeon, you know your limitations, and you know the limitations of brain surgery in general, that operating on yourself is not a thing. Obviously, if you're stuck down a hole somewhere. I was reading a book a few weeks ago about this fella who was out in the canyon somewhere, either mountain biking or walking, and he got stuck in some hole somewhere for about 5 days and nights. His hand got stuck under a huge boulder. After 5 days, he ended up cutting his hand off with whatever implement he had available, and then breaking his bone to separate. He ended up alive at the end of it, which is good. But he had to do that. If he was a surgeon, he wouldn't go, oh, I'm not a surgeon, I'm not going to do that, I don't want to do myself harm. Or if he was a surgeon, he wouldn't go, oh, I'm a surgeon, so I'll just chop my hand off right now, I won't wait the 5 days. No, you wait the 5 days till you're fucking desperate, and then whether you're a surgeon or not becomes irrelevant. Becomes irrelevant to the decision. It becomes relevant to whether or not your chances of survival are high, but it's irrelevant to the decision. You don't go thinking, will I chop my hand off now or not? I have to decide. I'll have a look at my qualifications and see. I'll look up my CV on my phone here, whatever, on Dropbox, and I'll see. Hopefully I have it on Dropbox, because I'm out here in the canyon somewhere. There isn't much data available. So hopefully I have Dropbox set up whereby my CV is set as a favourite document and it syncs automatically, so there's a copy kept on my phone no matter what. Because otherwise I'm just going to have to think about my qualifications in my brain. And my brain isn't working very well at the moment, to be honest. Which is probably a reason why I shouldn't operate on myself. I don't really have a choice, that's the point. Don't have a choice. Don't have a choice.
Are you going into your head?
Two cats walk into a bar. One of the cats goes straight up to the bar counter and says hello. Can I have a pint of your finest Guinness, please? And the man behind the bar says, certainly, sir, a pint of my finest Guinness coming right up. Coming right up. And the cat says, don't start this again. We've been over this. We've done this in at least 2 episodes during the winter now. It's May now. We're back. It's our first winter back after the 7-year interlude. We've done a couple of episodes during the winter when we did a load of getting a bit obsessed about all that stuff with the coming right up, because you thought you were doing catchphrases now and recurring bits. But no, let's not do that. Let's have a nice spring clear out. It's the first show of May. Let's get rid of all that winter crap and be original. And the cat says, what in the name of Christ are you talking about? We're doing a two cats walk into a bar story as being the bread and butter of this podcast since 2006. We're not clearing out shit. For one thing, even if we weren't doing this, I would still go into a bar and I would still want a pint of your finest Guinness, and I'd still want you to indulge me in conversation regardless of whether or not it was being created for a creative venture on the podcast somewhere. I'd still want all this to happen. And the man behind the bar says, yes, but this wouldn't happen. It wouldn't happen at all. Unless I suppose he was dreaming or something and doing this involuntarily. It'd be rather annoying, having a thing where you've never made a podcast, but you have an idea in your subconscious that might have made a great podcast for 18 years of your life. But instead of coming up with it in your conscious brain, it's coming up in your dreams every few nights. You're having recurring dreams about cats walking into bars and wondering what in the name of Christ it all means. And the man behind the bar says, was that you said that or me? And the cat says, you see, that's exactly what I'm talking about. It's all so vague. We don't even know what's going on. It's like a dream world. I go off on some big long rigmarole where I talk about the creative process and cats walking into bars and dreams about how this would all be going on in his subconscious brain during his dreams if he hadn't had an outlet for it as a podcast all these years. And yes, you're going, I don't know what you're going. Point is, I've no idea when I say that. At the end of saying that, I don't know whether that was me or you saying that, whether it was the barman talking next or the cat talking next. And that's exactly the sort of thing that happens in the dream. Everything's vague and uncertain. In a dream, when you go to pick up the phone, you're not sure whether you've picked it up or if it's working or not, and it doesn't work the way it does in real life. And the man behind the bar says, so tell me how this would work in real life, sir. A cat walks into a bar and claims that although it's not a story for a podcast, he still wants to come into the bar and wants me to entertain him with stimulation conversation, even though it's not being created for a podcast. But the cat is also arguing that because it's not being used as a creative outlet for a podcast, it's probably just happening in the dregs of someone's dream somewhere. Is that what's happening here? And the cat says, yes, that's exactly what it is. You've got it in one. Well, I say in one. It's been 4 minutes and 12 seconds. You can't really say got it in one to that. Well, that's how long form podcasting works. If you want to get it in one, do it in, well, this isn't fucking TikTok. Although if you want TikTok, we have TikTok segments available now. But I'm not going to do a thing where this is a podcast. I'm going to make my whole point in 10 seconds. No, there's going to be no get it in one on this thing. The cat says, and the man behind the bar says, I'm so fucking confused. I'm so confused. And I don't even want to reiterate why I'm so confused or say what I've come to understand so far from this segment. Because by the time I get through it, I'll have forgotten what I was trying to explain, and it'll just be fucking pointless. And the cat says, I don't disagree. I don't disagree with any of that, sir. Anyway, can I have a pint of your finest Guinness, please? And the man behind the bar says, certainly, sir. Will Beamish do? And the cat says, will Beamish do what? And the man behind the bar says, will it fill a gap? Will it fill a hole in your metaphorical stomach? And will you be able to afford it? Because Beamish is traditionally less expensive than Guinness, and I don't want a cat to be lumbered with a huge bill at this age, especially if there's a possibility that it's never going to be made into a podcast, and this is all just going to be flotsam and jetsam in someone's never satisfied creative ideas that are floating around in someone's brain, so he just has them as dreams instead. I can't even remember what that point started as. I don't know. Point is, oh yes, I don't want you, a cat, who may not have a creative outlet now. I don't want you having to take out loans for the rest of your life and manage your debt after buying a Beamish that you couldn't afford. for something that may not even ever end up as a podcast idea. It might be just in a dream somewhere. That's the point. And the cat says, "Give me a pint of Guinness, please." And the man behind the bar says, "Certainly, sir. Would you like me to start you a tab?" And the cat says, "What kind of tab?" And the barman says, "A tab whereby you give me some money and I put the money on your tab and then I deduct each item you buy from the tab." So it's I suppose it's more of a prepayment tab, if you like, because that's how you young people do things nowadays. You get your phones and you have a prepaid phone, like some sort of criminal. They get all the kids now, they have these burner phones. It's a prepaid phone and they go up to the phone thing and they say, "Hello, I'd like to buy €10 of phone coverage per month in advance. But it's 2024 now, so I don't want to have to go into buy a shop and get it as a printout of a receipt and enter a 16-digit code into my phone. Because for one thing, that'll make me feel like a failure. As a grown adult, I don't want to be doing that. So what I'll do is set up that thing where it automatically takes the money off your debit card every month and tops up your credit. And that's still a burner phone and it's still a prepaid phone for losers. But I don't feel like such a loser because it all happens in the middle of the night. Every fourth Saturday night, a text comes through saying, "Oh, you need to top up your phone by €20 in the next 24 hours to keep whatever your plan is." And then a day later, I get another thing saying, "Oh, your phone is being topped up automatically as per your other planned thing." It's a bit of a loser thing to do, but not as much of a loser because it's not like you're going out finding the cash somewhere and then going down to some news agents and saying, "Hello, what's a news agent? I haven't had them since the 1990s, but also can I have €15.14 of phone credit on a receipt on a number that I have to type into something here," which really makes me feel like a loser. Even though, let me be clear about this, if you're doing that, you're not a loser. You're a successful young person. And you're probably in college, are you? You probably are. You're probably in college. You're probably doing a degree in journalism or a degree in mathematics or a degree in geometry. You might be doing a degree in geometry where you're learning all about mathematical degrees, like 3 degrees and 4 degrees and 90 degrees and 180 degrees and all the degrees in between and 360 degrees. Now be careful with that one, because if you're going to be studying 360 degrees, that's pretty much just, if you're looking at something and then you say, "Oh, let's look at this from a different angle," but the angle is 360 degrees, that's not going to make any difference to you. It's just going to be the same thing. If you look at something from 360-degree angle, that's just the same thing. That's like looking out at something from your eyes. Well, if you could somehow put your eyes in the back of your head and look out through your eye sockets using your face. If you could somehow put your face inside your skull and look out through your eyes from behind your eyes. So you'd have your face would be behind your eyes and you'd be looking out through your own face like it's some sort of a mask. That's what that would be like, I imagine. I imagine that's a quite interesting thing. That would be quite an interesting thing to study in college. So don't get me put that off you. I studied accountancy. It's the most boring thing ever. So if you're doing a thing where you get to study what it might be like to look out through your own face, using your own face and looking out through your skull and mathematically explaining why that makes 360 degrees interesting, then don't let me stop you at all. That's exactly the sort of thing they should be studying in third-level institutions. Not double-entry bookkeeping. No double-entry bookkeeping. No bookkeeping of any kind. As libraries, I'm not claiming to think that double-entry bookkeeping or bookkeeping is about running a library. I'm not that stupid. For one thing, in a library you don't keep the books. You keep a record of the books. And in a successful library, the books spend as little time as possible in the library. They spend as much time as possible in someone else's hands on loan and waiting to be given to someone else who's waiting for them, but not waiting too long. I suppose you could argue that in a successful library, the books are all never on loan. They're always available in the library. There's that too, I suppose. It's a bit like how a successful retail business It doesn't have everything. It doesn't have a big, huge shop full of stock all the time that just sits there for years. It has last minute arrivals of stock. The stock arrive just in time. That's what they call it. Just in time logistics. That's what they call it on the supermarket food chain. That food turns up just in time and you sell it. So you don't have to have 8 acres of storage space. So I suppose maybe it should be like that with a library, or maybe not. I don't know. Anyway, on with the show. This is an afterlude to today's episode of Into Your Head podcast. Hello. Just putting in an afterlude here as more as an exercise of self-restraint than anything else. Because I realise I want to get a fucking podcast out and not stretch this thing out to an hour and 15 minutes as I've done a few times lately. Get it done and dusted, so we'll call this an afterlude and then that'll be an end to it. There's no way I'm going to come out here and disobey myself and put on something else after the afterlude. I suppose I could come along and put something else in the middle. There's no way to stop myself doing that. I could come along here. I could feel rejuvenated maybe after my next piss or after checking if there's been any bills in the post. I might feel rejuvenated and come in here and say, no, I'm going to do another half an hour. I'm going to do Once Upon a Time There Was 2 Dogs. Except I won't, because predictably it'll turn into a thing where I say, oh, for new listeners, I just want you to know, normally I do Once Upon a Time There Was a Dog, which is very satisfying. I like saying it like that, but I thought I'd try it with dogs plural this time, and it wasn't enjoyable at all. But I'll somehow turn this into a 30-minute thing. So there's nothing to stop me coming along later and doing that. But just know that if that has happened, I've tried to stop myself by putting in this afterlude at the end and saying, no, I'm putting a stop to it now. So how will you know whether I've been successful in that endeavour? I don't know. You might think, because thinking at the moment how much of the podcast I've made so far, there's stuff you might listen to that I've already made that you might think, that sounds a bit overindulgent. I bet you he came along after he made that final afterlude and did another little bit and added it in before it. And I've no way of dissuading you of that. So you probably think I'm fucking failure now. I don't really know what to do about that other than to say I'm trying my best here. I'm trying my best. Suffice to say, I just want to get this done and dusted and get her up and out and into the internet, and then do some other stuff tomorrow, and then the day after tomorrow record another podcast, and then put that up in a couple of days. And then your app will probably say, oh, this podcast now comes out every 3 hours. Next episode confidently expected at 4 p.m. That's what it'd say. Well, ignore it. It's lying to you. It's a load of bollocks. Anyway, is this a good way to end it? I don't know. Well, I suppose the whole point of an afterlude is that you've already ended it. The point of an afterlude is you're happy with the existing ending and you don't want to come along and say, this is the extra thing after the ending that's going to be even better. No, an afterlude is like a little note you put at the end saying to your listeners goodbye. It's like when Stephen King writes The Stand and he comes along and he says, oh, and then they all die, the end. But then if he comes along and does an afterlude after that, he doesn't say, oh, and then the following even more exciting thing happens. Well, he doesn't. He'll say something like, I wrote this in Maine in 1984 on my typewriter, and as I'm typing this now, this afterlude, I've already sent the last chapter off to the publishers. I haven't told them that I'm writing an afterlude because I don't want them to think, oh, he mustn't be very happy with the ending. He's writing another ending. No, I didn't. So I didn't tell them that. And then, of course, there'll be a 20th anniversary edition of that book later, and everything. Stephen King will come on with an extra prelude at the beginning. He'll say, this is the 1998 prelude. I know there's been 4 other preludes before that, but this prelude, as I write this, the original book, the original edition of the book has just arrived back to me from the publishers. They've sent me a new copy of it because they want me to write a new prelude. So I'm reading it now. Well, I've just read it and I'm writing the prelude now. And then at the end, I'm going to write a new afterlude. But I'm not going to mention the afterlude in the existing edition. You know the afterlude, you've probably read it already. If you're a fan of this book, you've probably read it already. You probably read the original edition, you said the end, and then it has me talking about stuff. Well, I'm not going to mention that in the afterlude. I'm going to put another afterlude after that. And the afterlude is going to be about, I don't know what it's going to be about. If I knew that, I probably wouldn't do anything different. Apologies for this, but this is a further afterlude to today's episode of Into Your Head podcast. Hello. I genuinely wasn't going to do another one, but I'm very unhappy with that afterlude I just did. For one thing, it went on for ages but achieved nothing. It was rambling nonsense. And then it went on accusing me. Well, no, it went on accusing you of accusing me of having disobeyed myself, possibly by putting in an extra thing in the middle of the show. Which, by the way, I still haven't done and I'm not going to. So let that be if you have that little faith in me and my afterludes and my promises of not going back to... Well, it was more of a promise to me, really, than you. It was a promise to me to not record any further and just get on with getting this done and up and out. It wasn't a promise to you. I don't need to promise it to you, because if you're listening to this, I've already done it. It's already out there. That's like if you go in and you go into one of those Italian restaurants in some movie. Maybe you're you're a gangster or something. Or you're just one of the 99% of normal Italian people who just have never committed a crime in your life. How about that? And you're in a typical Italian restaurant somewhere. The chef, who's a friend of the family, comes out to you and says, I'm going to make you something very special, very, very, very special tonight. As they often do. It was rather stereotypical, but we did have a friend of the family who used to do that in his restaurant. He'd come out to my wife and he'd say, oh, I'm going to make you something very, very special tonight. Well, he didn't say that, but he'd come out and be very friendly and enthusiastic about our presence there. Now, he's dead now, but it wasn't a mafia thing or anything. There was no crime involvement in either that restaurant, which has since closed down. It actually has closed down while he was still alive, if I remember rightly. No, it was a perfectly decent restaurant, and there was no... Anyway, the point is, if a chef comes out to you, a stereotypical Italian chef, and comes out and says, I'm going to make you something very special, and then he goes and makes you something very special, and you look at it, and the something special he's made you is, I don't know, one of those Chinese wafer things that has a little message inside it, and you open up and has a little note, a fortune cookie, that's what they're called, a fortune cookie. And the fortune cookie has a note hanging, and the note says, I made you something very special, I hope you enjoyed it. Well, that's what an afterlude is. And maybe I would argue that an afterlude should be something better than that. But that comes with practice. So I just continue to doing afterludes until I get good at them. I think you'd agree from recent months of this show that I've mastered the prelude. In fact, so much so that I don't do them so much anymore. I've moved on. But the afterlude, no, I'm revisiting the afterlude because I think I could be better at it. But first I need to end this and get on with my day. So goodbye.